2014. I was in sixth grade. I was in sixth grade, and the talk of the town was the new scariest game of all time. A game so scary it kept me up all night one night. I was scared to go places alone, and I would get extreme anxiety at the mere mention of Five Nights at Freddy's. Yet, its popularity intrigued me, to the point where a friend and I made a multiplayer version of it in Minecraft on PS3. I watched friends at lunch play from a distance, stuck in this love-hate relationship that could... You know, this is getting pretty stupid. Quick version is, I stopped caring about the games until I was about in 9th grade when Pizza Sim was coming out, and I started getting into it, particularly the lore, thanks to MatPat. And then by then, the idea of eerie animatronics coming alive to kill people in the night had grown rusty. It wasn't scary anymore, but intriguing nonetheless. Although I wouldn't really call myself a true fan until 2022, 8 years after the fact, when I had been sent home from my mission in Costa Rica early, saw how bad security breach ended up, and started thinking about how I could possibly make a better game, even though literally all my game dev experience was in dreams at the time. But that led me to where I am today, and I mean that. I could seriously go full on conspiracy theorist mode and explain how my experience with the franchise led me to landing the job I have now. And while I'm not going to do that, because saying "oh wow" sounds really stupid, I do want to get across that this series has left a huge footprint in my life the way few other pieces of media have. And I really have to thank Scott Cawthon and the community for giving me such a great experience, even if a lot of the content and community themselves have a lot to be desired. But I just have to say that I love it, even if I don't love a lot of what it actually has to offer. So for its 10-year anniversary, I want to rank and review all the mainline FNaF games. This is of course my opinion, and there's no point in commenting that I'm wrong about Freddy in Space 2. That being said, if I don't explain why I love or hate a game all too well, let me know, I'll take the criticism. Also, for the games I'm not ranking, FNaF World, simply because I have no desire to play it whatsoever. Ultimate Custom Night, because I feel like that game is what you make it. Special Delivery, because I never played it when I was around. Or any of the prank games, for what I hope are obvious reasons. Also, I'm going to go in chronological order and give a full ranking at the very end, just to give a little context for all these games. So come with me as we turn back the clocks to August 2014, the beginning of the classic series. The game that started it all, Scott Cawthon's Hail Mary as a final attempt at breaking out as an indie game developer before going to beg for his cubicle back. And it could not have gone better for him. He took the negative reviews from his previous game, Chipper & Sons, that told him his characters looked like demented Chuck E. Cheese rejects to heart and designed a horror game. He literally turned his weaknesses into strengths, and I cannot get enough of it. Well, I mean, I can't get enough of the story behind the success. But how does the game that popularized mascot horror and spawned one of the biggest genres of fan games ever hold up? Not amazingly. You can call this a comparison to all the sequels and fan games that perfected this formula, and you'd be right. FNaF 1 laid the ground zero for the genre to expand, and for that, I commend it. But in terms of gameplay, it has some of the worst aspects of the FNaF gameplay genre, many of which were later jettisoned in the franchise for the better. It seems solid on paper. You have limited power to last from 12 to 6. Power is used when you look at cameras, use lights, or close doors, and you need to close the doors to keep animatronics out. Aesthetically, this works. You get stressed out wondering where the animatronics are, and in your stress you may make a mistake, which leads to either animatronic getting under your nose and jump scaring you, or precious power being drained. It also helps that while Bonnie and Chica's paths are set, they don't beeline to the office. They wander between different points of the pizzeria, and all of this is helped by the exceptional atmosphere that really holds up to this day. Animatronics are shrouded in darkness, backgrounds change on random, and hallucinations are terrifying. But once you peel back the paper, this game is just a lot of waiting. You wait for an animatronic to come to your door, wait for 6 a.m., wait for death. I think this is the absolute worst aspect of any FNaF game, and really any game in general. Your inability to prevent any animatronics from progressing to your position until the literal last second kills the immersion. There's no point in looking for animatronics if you can't do anything once you found them. This renders Bonnie and Chica as really boring threats. Foxy and Freddy work a bit differently, needing the cameras to be used on them to delay their attack, which is a step in the right direction, but is ultimately a game of closing the doors when they get too close. So for the first 2 or 3 nights, the pacing is absolutely atrocious. You just wait. Now, night 4 onwards, the difficulty ramps up to its advantage, and admittedly gets decently fun. But when the push comes to shove, it's time to cheese. For those who don't know, cheesing refers to when you play a game in the way the developers didn't intend on. This is usually a good thing. It gives the player a sense of agency as they go about the world. From Software games like Elden Ring do this amazingly. They have cheesing methods like certain builds or items, but by design, you can beat the final boss in a loincloth. It works because you don't need to have broken builds to handle challenges. But in the FNaF series, this is when the game falls apart. The problem arises when the game gets so hard that cheesing becomes the only option. The earlier FNaF games were notorious for this. This game wants you to keep track of everything at all times, but in reality, we can just check 1 or 2 cameras and the lights, and that's the best way to conserve power until 6 AM. And sometimes that doesn't even work due to RNG. Not to mention that these nights are long, almost 9 minutes to be exact, and nothing feels worse than dying at 5 AM just to lose all that progress with no means of speeding up the process, which was sadly a problem that persisted with the series until Sister Location. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of first games and franchises that come out swinging and hold up years later. But this is not one of those games. I can see how the series got popular from this game alone, but unlike the original Super Mario Bros., Pokemon, or Castlevania, I can't rate the original Five Nights at Freddy's very high. But as it stands, it holds both first and last place in our ranking. But it won't stay first for very long. But probably longer than you were expecting, unlike this game's development time. FNaF 2 Electric Boogaloo came out mere months after the first, and everybody loved it for some reason. Well, not everybody. As early as this game, people started recognizing that this was becoming a cash cow and sadly laid the groundwork for questionable indie horror business practices that would inspire Bendy, Poppy, and Ban. But I'm not going to say heads or tails on that. This is about the game, and if you've watched some of my other FNaF videos, you know FNaF 2 is the dead rock bottom of my ranking. Let's speed through this.
This one really sucks. The first one was better than this. And I guess I was supposed to be frightened when that thing came at me. It didn't do anything.
Starting with the good stuff, because there is actually a bit of it. For starters, the environment. While the atmosphere is a tad weaker due to the building being more lit, this pizzeria is just beautiful to look at. You see the stage, party rooms, toys, and attractions in stunning detail. Where FNaF 1 made cleverly haunting abandoned pizzeria, this is a place I'd be comfortable taking a child to. While that doesn't help the horror side of the game, it is a plus nonetheless. It's actually really fun to look at different cameras. Remember I said this. This game also gave us so much more characters and character. Get it? Not only do we get more animatronics, some of which becoming fan favorites like Mangle, the puppet, Toy Chica, but we also get death minigames, the Purple Guy, and really just a new foundation for the lore. This was really the game which solidified the overall tone of the series going forward. At least until Sister Location changed it again. And I know this is hardly a compliment, but I think this is also the game with the best phone calls out of the first 3 games. Night 6's in particular being my favorite in the series.
We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it.
And I think people get really caught up in those aspects and forget how bad playing this game actually is. Gameplay is easily the weakest part of this game. Everything else I'd say is a step up from FNaF 1, but gameplay, So, this game's claim to fame is the 10 animatronics, 11 if you count the puppet. 4 toys, 4 Wizards, Balloon Boy, and Golden Freddy. Let me quickly run down how to defend yourself from each animatronic. Toy Freddy, put on your mask when he's in the office. Toy Bonnie, put on your mask when he's in the right vent. Toy Chica, put on your mask when she's in the left vent. Mangle, put on your mask when she's in the right vent. Withered Freddy, put on your mask when he's in the office. Withered Bonnie, put on your mask when he's in the office. Withered Chica, put on your mask when she's in the office. Foxy, flash your light on him in the hallway. Balloon Boy, put on your mask when he's in the left vent. Golden Freddy, put on your mask when he's in the office. Do you see the problem? And yes, I did copy and paste that audio over and over again. It doesn't matter how many animatronics you have. If you defend yourself from all of them with the press of one button, you've got a problem. And while Foxy and technically the puppet are different, none of them provide any reason to watch any camera other than 11. And it sucks. Because as I said before, the environments in this game are top notch. But the game falters by falling into its own cheesy trap of music, mask, lights, repeat. It's also worth noting that cheesing doesn't always work. This game is notorious for having one of the most unfair final nights in the series. FNaF 1 laid the foundation for this point-and-click horror genre and just needed some building on. FNaF 2 built on everything except the gameplay, where it drilled downward into a hole in the ground. I'm putting FNaF 2 below FNaF 1, and spoiler alert, it's coming dead last. You may think that there are games worse than FNaF 2, and I either disagree with you on an objective level, or would actually rather play an objectively worse game than it. Speaking of hot takes, I've heard way too many people say that FNaF 3 is the worst of the classic series, and on the surface, that's understandable. FNaF 3 had a single lethal animatronic, jettisoned the power aspect in favor of a maintenance panel, but can we be real, FNaF 2 did that already, gave us significantly weaker jump scares, and an ultimately questionable gameplay loop. Not to mention, FNaF Burnout was at a near high at this point. Even Markiplier was getting sick of the games at this point.
I don't even think that I want there to be any more Five Nights at Freddy's after this.
But if you've seen my Help Wanted video, you'll know I actually love FNaF 3. But I won't pretend like it doesn't have its shortcomings. Shortcomings that make the game just shy of greatness. But first, the strengths. Ejecting the pizzeria setting in favor of a theme park horror attraction was a brilliant idea. You can only get so scary with a realistic setting for a pizza place. While I don't think this setting is terrifying due to just being a bit too bright and really green, I do enjoy looking at it, similar to FNaF 2. It has a borderline Silent Hill effect. Phone Dude is really cool, he needed more screen time. And the first night is a really good idea on paper. This is clever and subversive, but is also kind of awful for repeat playthroughs, and the fact that this makes this the game with the least nights in the series because of no custom night. The Atari minigames have stepped up in terms of cinematics, that's really cool. And then of course Springtrap, he's really cool. I never loved Springtrap like others, and I don't need to mention how Palpatine-like he's become, but I do think his role here as somewhat of the main antagonist of the series is really great, especially with those cutscenes. And his gameplay aspects seem like 2 steps forward, 1 step back from FNaF 2. Basically, he's smarter than any other animatronic. He has multiple methods of making his way to your office, and praise to this game, keeping him away isn't just something you do when he gets to your office. If that happens, it's over. It's an actual process of keeping him away, using audio lures and vent doors to prevent him from making his way towards you. And this is far better than just waiting for him to get close enough. Now, the step back part is that he's really the only one, and sticking all your attention on him can be a bit too easy at times. That and the map is a bit too linear, like it's literally just a squiggle line. The phantoms and vents are meant to remedy these parts, and they do a decent job. Phantoms come out of nowhere and throw a wrench into your defenses, and the vent system can give Springtrap a shortcut to your office. But on the plus side, if you do lose track of Springtrap, finding him again is actually incredibly tricky and stressful. He also blends into the environment, which just works. It's a lot more stressful than, say, losing track of Bonnie or Chica on FNaF 1 since you have no defenses in or around your office. So as simple as keeping a single animatronic away from you seems, Springtrap is incredibly capable. Though I think another lethal animatronic would have solved this completely. Though that's completely hypothetical. And then the maintenance panel. This is often noted as one of the worst parts of the gameplay, replacing resource management with waiting for your system's reboot. And on the surface, yeah, that seems awful. But there is actually a science to this. All of your systems do have a somewhat fixed quantity for every night before you need to reboot them. Take that as you will, but I personally love it. So ultimately, I love the game and think it was a decent enough ending to the franchise. You know, with that secret ending. Oh boy. Look, I like playing through the game with the secrets in tow. I actually think it's a fun way and the best way to do it. But what the heck, Scott? This is the most complicated way to obtain a secret ending in the main series. I would say in FNaF history, but Popco's exists. Anyway, I can see why people don't like this game, because it is very different from the previous 2. But I think this is a change for the better. I think it builds on what the first 2 games did really well. Let me reiterate that if you don't agree with me, that is completely fine, and I honestly don't care. I know FNaF 3's gameplay is controversial in the franchise. I just hope I'm getting across why I like this one better than the first 2. FNaF 3 is a game that has a lot of pros and a few notable cons, but at the end of the day, it ranks much higher than the first 2 in my book. But its biggest con for me was that the concept just hadn't reached its true potential, which it would later in the series. But for Scott, it was that stupid Springtrap jump scare, so let's fix that. Okay, first things first, this title screen might be one of the best I've ever seen in any video game ever. The other 3 were decent, but this one, ooh. We see the silhouettes of these nightmare animatronics looking at the outline of a house on the hill, and one thing is very clear. Our troubles were once confined to a pizzeria. Once we got fired, we were safe from the animatronics. But now, this. They are on our turf now. We are no longer safe.
Look at that tongue. Imagine if humans had tongues like that.
They could get right in there, couldn't they?
You could stab a good piece of sweet corn, though.
I think we went to 2 very different places with that.
This solidifies FNaF 4 as the absolute scariest in the franchise. It's not even a competition. While the house the game takes place in isn't terribly interesting, save for the double-doored room, like seriously, who has a room like this? It's drenched in darkness. Your home, your bed, everything is now the hunting ground for the nightmare animatronics, the best looking animatronics in the series. Even the Atari cutscenes have a scared child feel to it, despite being some of the most normal in the series. I can say that because I was that child for the time.
Oh, he's crying in the corner. It's me! Oh, thank you for making a game about my Tuesdays.
And that sound design, man. Now, what I'm about to say may be very much a hot take, but FNaF 4, from both an aesthetically and gameplay standpoint, is my absolute favorite of the Scott games. On the surface, on paper, explaining it out loud, it's horrible. It's pretty similar to FNaF 1 and 2, go from side to side checking for monsters and acting accordingly. But the catch is that keeping animatronics away is both a process and a reaction, taking from all 3 of the previous games. Flashing your light into the halls keep Bonnie and Chico away, but at the same time, it takes good hearing to know if they're too close for comfort. Freddy, Okay, admittedly, that's just a music box. But at least it's not relegated to cameras or anything. Boxy is a mix of the two. You can keep him away with your light, but if he gets into your room, he becomes a second music box. And that is actually amazing. He only becomes a real problem if you can't keep him away. And it's all made better by implementing the sound design into the gameplay. FNaF 1 and 2 can be played on mute. FNaF 3 was easier with noise due to Springtrap going into vents and moving, but it's still possible to do with no audio. FNaF 4 relies on its sound to survive, and it works so well. You cannot play it on mute. You are constantly on alert, listening to where Foxy is, if an animatronic is at the door, making any and all disruptions in the sound, like cars and clocks, frighteningly present, similar to games like Silent Hill. I absolutely love this. This game is the peak of the series in terms of psychological horror, and the gameplay is thankfully strong enough to carry it. FNaF 4 is the absolute top of the classic series for me, and the perfect spot to end the series. That's not to say I think it should have ended here. That's like saying Disney should have never bought Star Wars. Yeah, a lot of crap came from it, but I cannot deny the good. I'm okay with enduring a sequel trilogy for Andor. Hey, so post-recording ZJ here. This is not the last time I'm going to be mentioning Star Wars in this video. I actually make the comparison a lot because I kind of wrote the script over the course of several days, and I just didn't realize how much Star Wars stuff I was putting into it. So I'm going to put a little counter for the Star Wars references in this video, because there's a lot of them, strangely. But for the time, Scott thought this was a good ending spot as well. The only things we really got past this until the next game in 2016 was the FNaF World and the book series. If you want my quick opinions on those, I've never played FNaF World. I really don't have a desire to. I know it's like the most simple RPG, but it's a little too simple if you ask me. And Scott apparently doesn't like that one either, so. But I really don't care for the Silver Eyes trilogy. I'm not the biggest reader, as you may imagine, but a series like FNaF just doesn't translate well to a written trilogy to me. I didn't find any of the characters all that interesting, memorable, or good. The action is not fit for text, the lore dumping is interesting at best and series breaking at worst, and the writing itself is just kind of eh. While I'm on the subject, I actually really do like a lot of the anthology stories. I think that actually works much better for the series, rather than make a single run-on story, a couple dozen short, barely connected stories that give little insights into the universe. Those are really good. I think my favorite is B7 off the top of my head, despite the controversy behind it. Also, B7 2 is an absolute garbage fire. It was wholesome, but ruined the first one. But anyway, back to the games with 2016's... Sister location, sister location, sister location. Unlike the previous games, there is a lot to get into about this game. Some have even talked for over an hour about it, and I want to keep this brief, so here we go. Sister Location takes more of a narrative approach and completely destroys the format the previous games solidified. Rather than 5 or so near identical nights where the player survives until 6 AM, Sister Location has several different objective-based levels as each night, which is actually a change I really like. On paper. Night 1 is a really long cutscene, Night 2 starts out with that, and then has some pretty good gameplay segments. Night 3 has some gameplay segments that are more questionable. Night 4 is Night 4, and Night 5 is either more Night 3 or a total nightmare. The change in formats isn't the problem. It's the fact that the formulas and game mechanics are some of the worst in the franchise. Most of them, at least. There are some legitimately good sections and moments of this game, particularly on Night 2. But on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, I don't even have footage of Enter Night because I never got to it. I literally spent an hour and a half trying to get to it and then thought, what am I doing?
Just sounds like a skill issue, not gonna lie. Just sounds like a skill issue, not gonna lie.
And even if most of the sections are bad, at least you're not doing them over and over again. Except for the fact that you are. The checkpoint system in this game is broken. I'm talking you are replaying segments you already completed because you failed one that came afterwards. This just takes an already weaker game, scrapes its wounds with a cheese grater, and chucks it into the Dead Sea. On top of that, this game definitely takes more of a FNaF World approach. The game is much more comedy-centric than the previous ones, which I don't see as a bad thing. I mean, I like the phone guy and phone dude, but the comedy here is not the series' peak, especially if you hate exotic butters.
Where you get to really ask yourself, what am I doing with my life?
And on top of that, the scares have been drastically toned down from FNaF 4. There are some really good moments and jump scares, but yeah, this is definitely the beginning of the FNaF is for Kids arc. So yeah, I don't think this game is very good. It has some highs, really high highs, but there is so much done wrong that absolutely sours those good times. But the question I'm stuck asking myself is, among FNaF 1 or 2, Where does this rank? Would I rather play this game or one of those? FNaF 1 and 2 are the worst forms of FNaF gameplay in the series, but they do those gameplay forms as good as possible. Sister Location tries to be much better and just fails. Sister Location also has much higher highs, but I'd rather wind a music box than spring locks. But at gunpoint, if I'm not going for Ender Night, I'll put it above the first two games. But if I am, it'll be dead last. So as a courtesy, I'll put in the former scenario and put it as the best of the worst. But as I alluded to before, this game is kind of the Force Awakens of the FNaF franchise, where people look at it and question if the series just should have stayed gone. But whereas the Force Awakens was the same in all the worst ways, Sister Location was different in all the worst ways. And as much of a garbage fire as it really is and will become, it's worth it for Rogue One. It's initially hard to judge Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. For one, it's free. It doesn't have to be amazing. But if you ask me, that's usually only a problem if a game is bad, because what's worth paying for is completely different than what's worth playing. I wouldn't say Indigo Park is worth paying for, but it's still a good time. Garten of Banban, on the other hand, just isn't worth anything. Thankfully, for possibly my coldest take of the video, I think Pizza Sim is pretty good. Similarly to Sister Location, there's a lot to go into this, so to save time, I'm gonna gloss over the great fake-out nature of the game's intro and jump straight into the main gameplay. Because gameplay-wise, I think Pizza Sim does everything Sister Location tried doing, but just so much better. It meets a nice halfway point between the repetition of the classic games and the not of Sister Location to make a sequential format where every night has 3 sections of gameplay to complete. Tycoon, Fence, and Interrogation. Yeah, I know that's not what they're called, but shut up. To start, the Tycoon. As somebody who doesn't necessarily wet their pants at the thought of a new Sid Meier's game, I think this is a pretty decent Tycoon style gameplay. It's nothing amazing, like you could probably find more complicated Tycoons on Roblox, but that's not necessarily the main appeal. The main appeal are the minigames with lore bits and bonuses, and if you know me, you know I love small high-score arcade sections in bigger games, and some of these are very addicting. I've spent too long trying to get jackpots in Basketball and Fruity Maze, and it actually makes me really excited for Fazbear Tycoon, which is a game dedicated to expanding this gameplay style. What do you mean it's canceled? Overall, it's really fun, a little basic, but it's really only a third of the selling point. Vents is much more traditional, and honestly, it's almost perfect FNaF gameplay in my book. It's similar to Sister Location's Breaker Room, just expanded upon. You process some tasks on the monitor while keeping animatronics at bay, and I personally love it. I just wish it was explained a little bit better. It's never quite clear what one does wrong here. Plus, none of the animatronics are particularly unique gameplay-wise, which you can't really be in this style. So yeah, almost perfect gameplay. The structure is there, but it doesn't really do anything insane with it. But I think that's kind of comparing it to several fan games like Tearland Juniors and Project Readjusted 3, which took this formula and just ran with it. And then the interrogation section. This one's kind of iffy. Terrifying, yes, but the instructions could be a bit clearer. Like I said in FNaF 4, opening all your senses to the nth degree makes the game terrifying, but not nearly as fun if you don't know what you're listening or looking for. Plus side is that if you die, you don't lose anything. Downside is you can't retry it, so say ciao to those $2,000. If you haven't gotten around to this game but plan to, I highly recommend looking up how to play this game effectively, more than any other FNaF game. It's good, just not explained well enough to know how to defend yourself. If you want a perfect version of these two gameplay sections, I highly recommend the demo for FNaF 6 Freak Show, which is a fan game that aims to perfect these two gameplay sections. That one got canceled too? Overall, Pizza Sim is an incredibly solid entry in the series in my book. Rather than making one hit or miss gameplay style, it gives us 3 styles sequence that is all pretty good in my book. I wouldn't say any of them are stronger or weaker than each other. They've all got their pros and cons. None of them are amazing to me, but they're all definitely good. And that's why I'm going to tuck it under FNaF 4. I think the sections are all on par with FNaF 3, but FNaF 4's gameplay has no room for improvement like Pizza Sim does. But in comparing these two, I will say Pizza Sim has a way better ending than FNaF 4 does. And being a good game on top of that makes this a game of very satisfying ending for the series. For the time. Ultimate Custom Night came out, which is kind of like the VR missions of Pizza Sim. You have complete control over 50 animatronics plus some random ones. I'm not going to rank it simply because it's kind of what you make it, though I wouldn't say it's amazing or horrible. It's the one I come back to the least of the Scott games. Good for streamers, but not for me. And then that was it. That was the finale of the series. 3 games that I really liked, and 3 games I really hate. That may seem like I'm not a true fan, but shut up. Are you not a true Star Wars fan if you don't like anything past the original trilogy? Are you not a true Metroid fan if you don't like the original or the Return of Samus? It's not being a fake fan, it's called not being a blind fan. I'm not going to say something is amazing because Franchise X and Franchise X is great, especially not with this series. And that's one of the best things about the fan game scene. With a lot of elements being so varied in the series, fan games have taken what worked about some games, improved the lackluster elements, and have made some completely new concepts that fit incredibly well with the franchise. I absolutely love this part of the community. And and it makes me wish the community itself wasn't so notorious. I bring this up now because the Scott games and the Steel Wool games are so fundamentally different. I want to solidify my thoughts on the Scott games and the community as a whole right now, because you may think my opinion on the Steel Wool games are like the Star Wars sequels, but in actuality, they're more like the prequels to me. They have objective faults, but succeed in enough places where I can enjoy them. And with what came afterwards, it's very possible we misjudged what we were given. Spoiler alert, none of these games are going to the bottom of the list. Let me get that out of that way. I'm sorry FNaF 2 fans, but don't say I didn't warn you. For the rest of you that are brave enough to endure some guy on the internet's opinions, 3, 2, 1... First and foremost, I played this game on my Quest, which won't let me transfer footage over to my computer for some reason. So all the footage on this segment is going to be from my minigame ranking I did last year, which I screen recorded a cast of. Don't worry, I'll keep this brief. This was a collection of VR FNaF minigames that worked surprisingly well. Being mostly a point-and-click franchise, FNaF in VR just works so well. At least it should. The changes to each formula to accommodate the VR perspective are very noticeable and feel like they could have been fixed. The first 3 games were based off the first 3 FNaF games, but were all either on par or just worse than their original counterparts. 1 and 2 in particular become cheesable beyond all belief due to cameras always being on and draining no power. 3 remained pretty good in my opinion, but had the least levels out of all of them because, of course, they did the first Night Fake Out. But on that subject, seeing all these animatronics not only in 3D but in VR was pretty cool. There's no denying that. The darkroom games all revolve around using a flashlight, and no joke, these are some of the lowest points in the FNaF franchise, plush babies in particular. Vent repair is genuinely amazing, but there's only 2 levels plus 2 bonus levels, which really sucks. Parts and service is where you repair animatronics, and they're all pretty fun, just incredibly basic. And Night Terrors is an altered form of FNaF 4 formula, which makes it significantly worse version, but I can still get behind it. Now, there is no shortage of stinkers in this game. Some of the lowest in the series, not gonna lie. But there are also some genuine bangers here. I mean, there are a lot more bangers than there were in Sister Location, if that means anything to you. But I do genuinely love coming back to FNaF 3, Vent Repair, and Night Terrors. And then the DLC came out, which gave us plush babies and a few other questionable games, but also gave us Trick or Treat, Dreadbear, Danger Keep Out, and the best game to grace God's green earth, Pirate Ride. So as a full package, this was a very net positive experience. This was once my favorite FNaF game, but upon looking at it again, those stinkers really stick out, and having to replay a multitude of them to get to the credits doesn't help. If you want some more specific opinions, you can go watch my ranking of all the minigames. I think most of the opinions there hold up, though the video itself does not. I'm sorry, my Quest footage was horrible, and I was in a new living situation and was really unaware of how loud I could be. But if you can get behind that, by all means, watch it. I mean, please, watch any of my videos. Now, where would I rank this game now? This is tricky. Sorry, so those sore spots do really put it below FNaF 4, but with a multitude of minigames I absolutely adored, it puts itself leagues above Pizza Sim. Like, it's not even a contest between those two. But as pivotal of a game as this was, it's pretty clear that this was only a precursor to the big boy that failed so hard. Alright, get ready for a long one. Security Breach is a bad game.
No!
I know, it's hard to believe, but I can at least say I am where I am because this game was so horrendous on launch. But I'm gonna push the influences this game has on my life aside and just look at it as is. Now, I'm aware there were many design difficulties when it came to this game, like the pandemic, this being outside of Steel Wool's area of expertise, and Scott donating to politicians, which just... This is why I don't vote. So I'm not exactly sure who's at fault for this mess of a game, but that doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the game is still bad. It's, in fact, the only one of the Steel Wool games I consider to be bad. This game ended up being a collection of the worst aspects of Sister Location and Betty and the Ink Machine. For starters, this game on launch. Game files were filled with unused content and glitches were out the ears. It's actually theorized that they were still patching up bugs until the minute the game released on Steam. That made it horrible to play the game in its already abysmal checkpoint system. Your checkpoints are at these save stations that are scattered around, forcing you to redo a lot of progress if you glitch out. Oh, and if you want the true ending, you have to play half the game with no saving, so don't die. Though I don't know why you'd want the true ending, because not only is it not the true ending anymore, but it's not even worth bringing up Burn Trap. That's another main problem, the story. I know I haven't brought the story very much in this video because, for the most part, I think the story of FNaF is serviceable. Not great, not horrible, but it is clearly theory fodder. I just really don't want to get into too much lore on that. But this one needs a special shout out because of how completely deranged it is. Actually, that's kind of a knock on all the Steel Wool games. Their stories suck. They had a good idea of the complete reboot of the franchise being set in a universe where the Scott games were made by a lunatic. But then they said, we need continuity with the perfect ending Pizza Sam gave us.
This is a beautiful ending.
And it's just so disappointing because similarly to Sister Location, this game is so much more cinematic, and a good story was kind of expected, at least on my end. Sorry if I just have too high expectations for these games. And the game just kind of pretends that there's some kind of narrative going on. Seriously, there's a line where Gregory says, "Oh, if I leave now, more kids are just gonna go missing, and nothing is going to change, or I can investigate this place more and find out what's really going on." When was this ever established? Yeah, I know there are some notes of the story going on in the background, but like, that's not good storytelling, but I'll talk more on that in a bit. The gameplay itself now is... I'm conflicted. Could it have been so much better than just Alien Isolation for kids? Yes, definitely, absolutely. But I do want to give it the merits for trying. One of my biggest problems with games like Poppy, Ban Ban, and Indigo Park for that matter is the fact that the games never try to put you in danger except for extremely scripted spots. Yeah, there are a lot of really spooky cinematic areas, which I love, but it doesn't really feel like I have a game going on. It just feels like I'm going from point A to point B with a few puzzles. Granted, Security Breach does that with just security bots, but at least tries to put you in danger and put enemies in the room with you rather than just giving you a virtual haunted house. Now, is that evasive gameplay ever any good? No, it sucks. AI is either the dumbest thing ever or completely broken. The office sections are fine. I like the vent one a lot, actually. The game doesn't tell you where to go 90% of the time, and once you get a weapon, the game becomes significantly more boring. But at its best, I felt like I was in danger and not watching an interactive movie. And speaking of which, this game might have the best environment out of any FNaF game. It's so fun to explore the Pizzaplex, even if there's not that much to do in it. It is, at least on the surface, a fun indoor amusement park that would be really cool to see in operation. I mean, with how well lit the place is, it may as well be. Animatronics have more personality than ever, including Freddy, your new best friend.
Gregory, I need you to get in my hole. Huh?
I love it when what you're expecting to be an enemy ends up helping you out. And the game's secrets like duffel bags and therapy tapes are a blast to find and learn more about this world. Now, let me pick up on the rant from earlier. This does not mean put your entire story in a duffel bag. A player shouldn't miss out on a pivotal piece of story because they missed out on a secret. Secrets like this are for expanding the world, not the main story. But on that note, I like it when a world feels lived in and isn't just a setting for a video game. And this is without a doubt the best FNaF game to do it. Like seriously, do you ever think about how everyone else lives in this world? Corporate just sends you recorded messages of where guys died to animatronics? Who is paying you in Sister Location? Seriously. I guess 3, 4, and Pizza Sim all have better worlds, except for at the end when Pizza Sim, like how does that even work? When Security Breach, I love finding little notes about how the Pizzaplex works and liaisons with the customers and staff. One staff in particular, actually. Yep, easily one of my biggest disappointments about this game was the mishandling of Vanessa, or Vanny. This stank and could easily have been expanded upon, especially with the mental health background some of the therapy tapes hinted at. It's clear Steel Wool had her concept written out, but just had no idea what to do with her because she might take the spotlight away from our established antagonist. And I have no clue why, but I've always had a strange obsession with these types of characters. Super hyped up characters that are nothing more than wasted potential. Darth Maul, Infinite, Claw, pretty much any character in the sequel trilogy who isn't Rey, and my beloved Boba Fett. How they did you so dirty?
Here's my Boba Fett helmet. Yeah, I know, I got ripped off.
But similarly to Disney handling Boba Fett, I don't think we're really going to get anywhere with Vanny, at least not where we were heading before. So just give me the rights and I'll retcon the book of Boba Fett and make the best. Sorry, I forgot this was a FNaF video for a second. Anyway, call it sympathy, but I really like Vanny. And who knows, maybe she'll be used more, but horribly in the future. And that brings me back to my prequel analogy. This game is bad, no doubt about it. It's horrible when compared to the games that came beforehand. But looking at it now, after Poppy, Ban Ban, and all their clones, hear me out. It's not awful. It's bad, but not rock bottom. Some may blame it for the awful places indie horror has gone since then, and that's just not how I like to judge things. Like, do you judge Ocean's 11 for its awful sequels and spin-offs? See, I know they're movies. Yes, unlike Ocean's 11, Security Breach fails at almost everything it tries to do. But it tries, just like Sister Location, although it doesn't really reach some of the highs of that game. So, I'm gonna tuck it right under there. Maybe someday we'll get a game that takes this concept to its true potential. Man, I got 6 whole minutes out of that. I should have made a review for Security Breach a long time ago. But anyway, now we're kind of in a pickle because I've reviewed both of these last 2 games. So I hope I don't mind that I point you in the direction of those reviews and gloss over these last 2 games. But I will correct any thoughts or opinions in those games I think need updating as of now. Starting with the free DLC to Security Breach, Ruin. Now, I do owe a bit to this game. This was my first video to breach 1,000 views, which I am forever grateful for. And I'm willing to bet that some, if not most of you, found me by that video. And if that is you, thank you so much for sticking with me this past year. And most of my opinions in that video hold true today, except for one major one. Ruin is a major step up from Security Breach and can even be called what Security Breach should have been. It's a much more linear experience filled with puzzles, threats, and actual story beats. And in my review, I said it was my new favorite FNaF game. I completely rescind that notion. I think I was taken aback by how different it was from Security Breach. It wasn't broken, it actually had decent gameplay, it had good scares and a creepy environment. It was free. I got a little caught up in those positives and told myself it was better than my previous favorite, Help Wanted. But looking at it now, I don't think it even breaches 3 for me. Also, my description of Mexus in the original video was completely wrong. I claim that he calls animatronics to your position, but in actuality, he's basically just an animatronic that you avoid while in the digital space, which is way less cool. The puzzles, while much better than the ones in Security Breach, are very repetitive. I didn't mind it at first since the game isn't that long, but going back, it's very akin to hacking in BioShock. But I think the rest of my thoughts in the original video hold up. The story, while still not great, is much better structured than the wet toilet paper Security Breach gave us. And like I said before, the gameplay, environments, and the overall structure of the game is leagues better than the base game. But that's how I describe most of this game. Better than Security Breach. Heck, I'd even say it's better than the first 2 Poppy Playtime chapters. But you know what else is better than Security Breach?
To prove I did this all in one take. Coming in the Dark Revival, Choo Choo Charles, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 7, Lethal Company, Poppy Chapter 3, Signalis, Crow Country, It Steals, The Upturned, Amnesia the Dark Descent, Being Lost in the Nether in Minecraft, BioShock, Alien Isolation, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, Emulating Silent Hill games, Jedi Survivor, The Money Graveyard, Griswold Creation, a 13 on Wheat from Jimmy Jones, Guardians of the Great Showtime, The Bad Guys film. Did it! Being better than Security Breach is not an accomplishment of high praise. That being said, I do think at the end of the day, this game is good. It is a good game. It's just not all too memorable or unique outside of just being a good sequel to a bad game. If I had to compare it to a movie, it would be The Penguins of Madagascar. It has a lot of merits and is the best of a really mediocre franchise. I'm putting Ruin at its final resting spot above Sister Location. Man, that's the most I've thought about this game since last year. And then Help Wanted 2, the final game on our list. And I'm gonna take another guess and say that you've probably seen my video ranking all the minigames, more likely than the Ruin video. Because for some reason, it's consistently my most viewed video no matter what other videos I make. So it's a great reminder of the YouTube algorithm, and no matter what I'll do, I'll never be happy. And like I said, I don't think that video has aged all too amazingly. In fact, I think I was a bit too negative. Yes, you heard that right. I think I was a bit too harsh on some of the games there, like Bowling and Phaser Blast. I had to make that video in a very short amount of time, so I was a bit rushed and just had to choose some games to be displeased with. But overall, I think a lot of my actual rankings still stand, except I know Warehouse might be a bit too high, and I could give the bottom 3 a little bit more credit. But that goes to show how this game improves on Help Wanted's quality. Even with some games ranking lower than others, there are no bad games like there were before. Just a few ones that are either incredibly basic, like Music Man, or just pointless, like Entered. And it is another case where the games I absolutely loved didn't get nearly as many levels as the ones I thought were just okay. But some of the minigames in this game are just downright perfect. My favorites being the ones that give you a set of tasks to complete while you keep threats away, similar to Pizza Sim. But like I said, there's just not enough of them. But I'd rather want more from a great game than be given too much of an okay one. And while there are some minigames that tend to overstay their welcome, it's not nearly as bad as the first Help Wanted. So, like I said, go watch my original video if you haven't, and take my apologies from here to account. But for having both amazing amount of variety and really good gameplay formulas, Help Wanted 2 clutches its way to the top of our list at the last second. Good job, Help Wanted 2. Good job. So, what now? Scott announced he was retiring a long time ago, yet it's not clear where exactly he is in the development of the current games. I mean, it never has been to me. If anybody else wants to tell me, that'd be amazing. But with FNaF's 10-year anniversary underway, we've got a handful of new games and projects to look forward to. Some of which are part of the fanverse, which is something I can only say I hope survives, because the thought of being compensated for your fan game is amazing. And we still have a ton of games outside of the fanverse. Like, have you seen the trailer for Shadows Awaken? Love it or hate it, and trust me, I understand if you hate it, this series is not going anywhere. And looking at everywhere the series has been up until this point, I'm okay with that. There is so much wrong with this series and community. Heck, I completely understand if you detest this series or mascot horror as a whole, but I cannot deny the things that I love about it. Both its popularity and fan game scene as a whole just fascinate me, and that leaves us with this ranking. FNaF 2, FNaF, FNaF Security Breach, FNaF Sister Location, FNaF Security Breach Ruin, FNaF 3, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, FNaF VR Help Wanted, FNaF 4,
FNaF VR helped wanted too. Yeah, keep screaming at your screens, FNaF 2 fans, I love your tears. And I know I said I wanted to show off a teaser for my FNaF fan game in this video, but I sadly hit a few snags and ran out of time. I wanted to get this video out before the anniversary week began, and sadly was unable to finish the teaser. So keep an eye out for that. But who knows, maybe this comment section of this video will scare me away from doing anything related to the series again. Only time will tell. But for now, happy 10th anniversary to a series that terrified me 10 years ago and perplexes me 10 years later.